Well, Jacksonville artist Jim Draper joins me now. We're going to talk about his transition from the wilds of Florida to the dark recesses of his mind. He has written a new book of short stories called Shantyboat Stories, and he joins me now. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Ann.
It is nice to have you, and it is fascinating to see this new endeavor of yours because it is such a creative stretch after a career as a really, well-known and acclaimed painter here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's something I always wanted to do. As a child, I read all the Southern writers. I got so interested in it, and it's been on my bucket list. And so I got to the point in my life I need to start emptying the bucket. So,
And so Shantyboat Stories is actually named for the writer's shanty boat that you began attending to share your work and to get feedback. Tell us, for people who aren't familiar with the shanty boat um, and its history, tell us a little bit about Lynn's writing workshop there.
well, the Shanty Boat Workshop was started by Lynn Skapiak Harlan. Lynn and her husband Jim moved to Shanty Boat, plywood and tin boat on blue floats. They moved it from into the Seafarers Marina on the Trout River. And Lynn started doing writing workshops there several years ago. I got to a point when I turned 60, and I was like, again, I was trying to get the things done I always wanted to do. So I talked to Lynn. I'd known her for years. I talked to her about participating in the workshop. So I started it, and it was a wonderful thing. And we had you would crawl down this gangplank that was just like and it transported you. We had writers sitting around the table writing all sorts of different types of work, and we worked on just craft technique, and that's what we learned the craft technique. And the interesting thing about it is, I found a lot of correlations between the craft technique of painting and the craft techniques of writing. There was the same kind of, I mean, even the words, composition, all some of the same words are a segue from painting into writing.
Explain that a little bit more.
Well, I talked to Lynn about the fact that through her teaching skills, I improved. I was teaching at the time at UNF, and I could improve my teaching skills. Art is art. Whether it's the words are symbols, the words are units of a composition. Paint, marks, all those things are units of a composition. So if you understand that your job as an artist is to put those things together, those symbols together in a meaningful way, then that's what making art is. Music's the same way. The notes are components of a composition. So that's the way I approach writing. Not necessarily from a I'm no grammatical genius by any way, and I can't spell anything. And so it kind of it allowed me the freedom of composing thoughts using words instead of paint.
The shantyboat writing workshops were legendary for, I don't know if brutality is an overstatement, but people who experienced it, and Lynn herself would talk about it in interviews and podcasts about how it was a place where people really had to come prepared for very intense feedback.
Um, I think it was beyond intense. I think that she would strip you down to your bones, and in a good way, but it was done out of love. It wasn't done out of hate. It wasn't critical. It was a fair critique. It wasn't she wasn't being mean or critical. She was just being like, get rid of all that other mess in your mind and get to the cut to the chase and get your job done and learn the skills. It's that's one thing as a painter, as a realist painter. Also, I'm really taught learning the basic skills, and then once you learn the skills, you can go wherever you want to go. But learn the right way to do it. But yeah, Lynn was brutal. I mean, I saw people around the table cry, but it was always done like, here's a way that you can be better. I hear what you're saying, but you're not making any sense. Let's try it this way, or let's explore another avenue. So,
Were there certain patterns to the things that you got feedback from her on to strip away? Like, were there kinds of things that you found yourself falling into as a writer that that as a pattern she helped you correct, or was it more specific?
Oh, yeah, very much, because my first attempts at writing were very, very, much the way I paint. They were about color, they were about the woods, the flowers, and all this kinda stuff. Um, she's like, "People, that's enough's enough. Let's get some, get dialogue in there." She taught me that writer's adage about show don't tell, actually show through dialogue, and that was the main thing that I learned from her. The best thing is, like, how you can create a story through the characters' dialogue, and I think you'll see that through the book.
The way that you realize your characters and that you set the scene, though, is very specific, kind of in the same way that your art is, in terms of it is incredibly detailed. It is you can tell that the people that you're observing in your book, that you have watched them so closely that you're able to articulate the slightest movement to convey mood.
Yeah, and, that's what I do. I'm a watcher. I participate. When I go in the woods, I do the same thing. I can sit and watch an anthill, or watch a beetle travel through something, and I do the same thing with bugs that I do with people. I just watch and I listen, and, I try to pick up the nuances, and, I think the nuances in conversation and dialogue flesh out the characters. It's not the what they're saying, it's the how, as much as how they're saying it. So, yeah, that's what I enjoy. I get tickled in the grocery store line just listening, or in the, on the plane or whatever. I overhear. I'm nosy. It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Well, it is a really closely observed and just really astonishing, a feat. I wanna talk to you about the way that you structured this book, because it is 23 stories. It has, some nonfiction pieces, it has fiction pieces. Some of them are standalone, some of them connect over the course of the entire book and tell you a character's story over a period of many years. How did you, first of all, decide that you wanted to fiction do mix of fiction and nonfiction?
Well, I think it's almost I don't know if it was the cart before the horse, or I got the cart first and then the horse, or the horse first and then the cart. I don't know. Some of those stories have been rattling around in my head for decades, and some of them uh, the Everglades stories were both, they were pretty immediate, and I don't know exactly. Uh, Last year, as Lynn and I were putting these together, we started finding these correlations. I think that, from the stories, it would be the same thing in painting, in that, you have these similar themes that go through your life, whether they be imaginary or real. There's still things that are on your mind, and there's several kind of nuanced themes that just kind of drift all the way through. But I don't know where a lot of it came from. I do know that it's always been part of me and part of my thought process. So, and I think the way I put them together was just the way I think, and it's disparate, a lot of disparate thoughts, but they all match.
I don't think I've read a book, I mean, you could tell me if you have, where there is this, kind of a narrative through short stories that continues amid all of these other stories that, while they may have kind of a thematic connection, aren't really necessarily related to the longer series of short stories.
Right. I don't know that I've ever read anything like it. It wasn't intentional for me to change the world, but maybe it will.
These stories, some of them are very funny, some of them are very funny and also really very dark. And you have, you know, an exposure your whole life. You're a Southerner. You kind of have a little bit of a Southern Gothic sensibility, I would say, in your writing.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the dead center of Mississippi during a pretty horrific time. I was born in 1953, so I went through the end of Jim Crow, the beginning of civil rights, in I mean, the one of the stories references the helicopters when they were looking for the civil rights workers that were killed in Philadelphia. I remember the helicopters going in a grid over me, looking for the young men that were killed in the during Freedom Summer. I remember the Freedom Summer, the busloads of college kids coming down from the north, and all of us little kids were invisible then, so we followed all of the we back then we called them COFO workers because they though that was the slang from Central Mississippi because they worked with the colored folk. And, so we followed them around. Just I was so fascinated because they looked like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they looked like people we saw on TV, and I just wanted to be with them. I wanted to go home with them and not be where I was. So, but reading was a way to escape. As a young, like a junior high school age, I was, you're living in the middle of a culture that you intuitively know you're not necessarily a part of. Um, and I would walk across the town to the library on Saturday morning and check out just whatever I could get my hands on, mostly Southern writers. And I remember the librarian, who was a wonderfully ample lady, and she had half glasses, and she looked over at me as I was checking out Tennessee Williams, who I read all of his plays by the time I was probably 12. She said, "Does your mama know you're reading this?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she said, "Well, we don't have to tell her, do we?" But that was the way I learned. That's the way I learned that there was another world out there, and that this situation that I was in was temporary, and that it was another world. So,
You actually quote Tennessee Williams to start off your
uh
book. The quote begins, "The world is violent and mercurial. It will have its way with you. We are saved only by love." What is it about Tennessee Williams in particular that appealed to you, his work and his words?
I think that the thing that Tennessee Williams and probably most of the writers, the Southern writers of the time, is that they could look at these situations that we were in, and those situations from Tennessee Williams, from Eudora Welty, from Carson McCullers, William Faulkner, we saw those situations on a daily basis, and even the cadence of the language we were familiar with because we would sit in living rooms, in dusty living rooms with odd smells and weird old people talking about stories that were the same. I mean, they were the exact same stories, and so it made it. I think seeing them in print made it real, and it made it so that there was a special, uh, kind of a macabre special quality of our life then and there, and it made me realize that the fact that other people in the world thought it was special it just made it somehow more special for me. Um,
You talk about the helicopters, and that is in one of the stories that you write about, which is the story of a maid. She also appears throughout the book. Her name is Pi, but this is our first meeting of her where she's working in a home for a white woman who is, suffocating her, in kind of every way. But she gets her revenge in this particular story in a very, dramatic way. Um Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for the character of
well,
Pi.
I think that growing up in then and there in the South, when a child is born, you're taken home and you're handed to a black woman, and there's a relationship between Southern children, and especially I think Southern males, probably with black females. That I mean, they're your caretakers. They feed you. They cook every meal. They do all your clothes. I mean, I was privileged. I mean, I have to admit, and it's a weird place to be from. It's like that not just the geographical place, but the point of privilege, in that I never made up a bed. I never picked up a article of clothing off the floor. I never really did much of anything because we had people waiting on us hand and foot. More or less, and it was kind of. I mean, I guess I probably might have done more than I thought, but for the most part, these women and you would sit in the kitchen while the maid cooked lunch. We had a big dinner every day at 11 o'clock, and so you would sit there and you'd talk and you learn and you learned about things that weren't necessarily part of your culture, and there was some things unspoken, some things unsaid, some things that you knew were there, and Yeah, I've been challenged on writing from Pi's point of view about, how dare I, understand what it's like to be a black maid in the rural South in the '60s, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, how dare all of us who try to empathize, try to crawl into a character's mind. I mean, we do it. Is it right or wrong? I don't know. I did it. I, uh, I love the character. I love her because of so many, very strong, um, women who were part of my, uh, just, part of the way I grew up, what I grew up hearing and seeing and being, and they were, uh, and there was a component of love. There was a very very strong component of love and a very complex situation.
Yeah, and she is the maid in a family, where the young man, Henry, he's one of these recurring characters as well, and they have stories unto themselves, they have stories together, but he's a pretty flawed character.
Yeah, he is flawed, and he has, Henry has an unfortunate situation with peer pressure, which peer pressure is another thing that I think we're seeing a lot of in today's society. I wanted to kind of address the. You'll see some themes in there that are addressed because I just thought they need to be addressed in this current our current situational crisis that we're in. Um, yeah, but Henry goes along with the crowd and performs a horrific act that he pays for the rest of his life, and he can never be whole again. And Pi warns him that it's going to be with him, that this act is going to be with him for the rest of his life. And then, not a spoiler alert, but in the end, there's a certain resolution to that conflict, and both of them, in the end, seem to find some kind of resolution. So.
Yeah. And it is a fascinating journey that they each take. Um, this book has just been published. It is going to have a reception and kind of a
Yes,
launch
yes.
coming up on Wednesday of this week. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
Wednesday
what that
night,
involves?
it's at the, if and, another fascinating thing is to see what's happening at the Phoenix, on North Liberty, 2330, I think, North Liberty,
2320, I think, North
2320
Liberty.
North Liberty,
Yeah.
this development is just fascinating. It's just absolutely, if you don't know about it, it's something to learn about.
Yeah, the
Tony
Phoenix Arts
The
District
Phoenix Arts
is
District,
mhm.
Tony Cho from Miami has done a just and, Emily Moody is a dear friend and has just done a tremendous job spearheading this. Um, it's Wednesday evening, 6 to 9. I'm gonna do a short talk at 7. Not a long I've been back and forth on whether to do a reading. I think I'm gonna do, excerpts,
Okay.
short excerpts and not a full reading, but, Lynn's gonna talk a little bit, I'm gonna talk a little bit at 7, and then, but the rest of the evening will be festive. It'll be a celebration more than a lecture, so it'll be fun. So, it's open to the public. Please come, enjoy, uh 6 to 9, Wednesday at the Phoenix at the Emerald Station.
Yeah, 2320 North Liberty Street. And a lot to celebrate. I mean, it really is a extraordinary shift and new territory for you, and I sure hope everybody gets a chance to
Yeah,
enjoy
thank
it.
you. I'm a little all nervous about it, but it's what it is. You keep going. Artists, uh, people ask when you're going to retire. I said I'm on the shovel plan. Artists, you work, and then one day they dig a hole, and that's it. I'm just kind of I'll quit when I die.
Well, thanks for all the work that you've given us.
Thank you,
All right, Jim Draper, appreciate it.
thank you, Ann.